Hello and welcome to Hindsighting, where we discuss all the movies to win the Best Picture Oscar and try to figure out if this picture truly is the best or it's time rendered a different verdict. Deep Tease will be ending this episode with a very special programming announcement, so stay tuned. I'm Edward Clow. My guest today is a true dual threat in the entertainment industry, a top entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles as well as a professional screenwriter. His latest film, New York's Finest, directed by Owen Mackin and starring Kat Graham, begins filming this summer. And one of his strengths as a writer is bringing inspirational true stories to life, making him a perfect match for today's Best Picture winner. Michael Moskowitz, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah.
We've got a good year.
What's that?
We've got a good year here.
Moskowitz, I will just say now, is, in the short history of the show, the most prepared guest I've ever had. So guests who are following, who I have not recorded with, you need to follow his example. Today, we're hindsighting the Best Picture of 1981, Chariots of Fire. From 7 nominations, it also won Oscars for Best Original Screenplay, Best Costume Design, and Best Score. It was nominated against Atlantic City, On Golden Pond, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Reds. So last week we did Ordinary People, which put us into a new decade, the 80s. We're finally not talking about the 2000s. I think the 80s is an incredible decade. I think it's... I threw every 80s movie that I loved or even just liked a lot into a letterbox list, and it was 234 movies. Now,
wow, yeah,
that's not to say all of those movies are masterpieces. It's definitely a spectrum, but it was less than 100 for the 2000s, which should be the last thing I have to say about the 2000s. God knows people have heard me talk about that enough. I think this is an incredible decade. I guess my thesis for this, for this second season of Hindsighting is I don't know that the glory of the 80s is captured in these Best Picture winners.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it isn't, but I think that these Best Picture winners, at least at a glance, for the most part, to me feel stodgy, feel what we think about even today as like safe Oscar movies. It's not to say that they're bad. In fact, today's movie I had not ever seen before. So this is only the second time that I'm talking about a movie that I have no history with and actually no knowledge with. We'll get to that in a few minutes. So I had not seen Lord of the Rings, at least the third one, and I had never seen Chariots of Fire. We'll get to Chariots of Fire in a few minutes. So what I think is so incredible about the 80s, and I want to get your take on this because we're the same age, is I think this was an incredible decade where studios were putting out really high quality stuff in every genre. Like comedy strong, action adventure is strong, horror is strong, drama is strong. I think the problem is that these movies were mostly very successful. Obviously, the rate of success is different. You could have a hit that made less than $100 million because that was just more money back then, obviously.
Yeah.
I think that these movies were looked at as unserious and were largely ignored by the Academy Awards, with exceptions. Raiders of the Lost Ark is a movie we'll be talking about today that won as many, if not more, Oscars of any other movie that night. But when you think of the 80s, this as a decade for movies, what do you think?
Well, I think the 80s is a great decade for movies. I mean, I agree with the first part of your thesis on that. I mean, it's sandwiched in between 2 decades, which get a lot of well-deserved cred.
Yeah.
The 70s and the 90s.
Yeah.
And the 70s, in my book, probably is the best decade for movies. But the 80s is incredible. And I think people forget how many strong movies there were in the 80s. I mean, it's sort of known as the decade of the blockbusters. So that's true. But also you have, you've got Dead Poets Society, you've got Rain Man, there's so many, but, Born on the 4th of July.
Yeah.
There's a lot of movies in the 80s that you might think of as 90s movies or something. You don't realize that it was actually in the 80s. And I think that there's, in preparation for this podcast, because I guess I'm the most prepared. What I lack in insight, I make up for in research. There's some reasons why the 80s unfolded the way it did, I think, just technological. One was cable television. Another one was the introduction of the VCR.
Yeah.
So now you've got, by 1984, home video there's more revenue from home video than there is even in the theaters. And that changes what kind of movies can get greenlit. It actually expands it. It also sort of changes the artistic aesthetic of some movies, probably not for the better, because people are doing things like pan and scan, paying more attention to that. And so
Mm.
some of the artistic freedom gets, boxed in a little bit. But at the same time, it's like the age of the mall and the multiplex. And so you've got more screens and you've got more films.
Mm.
And so there's just so much happening in the 80s. And one of the things I think is interesting about 1981, the year we're here to talk about, is Tarantino, of all people, who's a lot smarter about movies than either of us are, or at least smarter than I am, talks about 81 as sort of this transition year where it's almost like the last year of the 70s aesthetic, and then you get into the 80s aesthetic. And I think no movie encapsulates that better than Raiders of the Lost Ark. To me,
Right.
sort of launches the 80s and what it became. But yeah, I think the 80s is a great, great decade for movies.
I agree with everything that you said. I want to follow up on one part.
Yeah.
You talked about VHS. Younger viewers might not realize before VHS, there was no ancillary home entertainment. VHS videotape was the first thing. We did have a bit of a format war between beta and VHS
Yeah.
right around this time in the
Yeah.
early 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, it was always a joke that like, oh, beta's like, even in like the late 80s, it was like beta was this old thing. It was
Right.
like literally a punchline about something being old and obsolete. You would always say beta or Betamax. And yes, before that, which is before we were born, if a movie didn't play on television, and by television I mean network television, you didn't see it. Now HBO's created in like the mid to late 70s, but HBO is something you still have to pay for. So the only way to see, new movies or newish movies uncut was HBO. There's been some great books written about HBO. I think there's a book called "It's Not TV, It's HBO." That's not just about the original programming, but about the entire network, like how the network was launched, like
Yeah.
the UHF in 1975 or whatever it was. Highly recommend that book, even if I got the title wrong. Yeah, so this does. I didn't know that Tarantino had said that, so I guess that puts me in good company because I think this year in particular, and we'll get to that in a little bit, does feel like a transition.
Yeah.
I think, this is you definitely feel a shift happening. And this is not something, I mean, you and I were 3 years old, so we didn't see any of these movies contemporaneously. I think the only movie I saw in the theater that year would be The Great Muppet Caper because it was a kid's movie, and I have literally one memory from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's.
I think you're right. I mean, I think we talked about this a little bit beforehand. I think that for people of our generation and probably people a little bit older and probably everyone younger, there's a little bit of a blind spot to the early 80s
Yeah.
because, we just weren't old enough to be watching these movies at the time. We've all seen the movies of the 70s because it's, my God, it's the 70s and it's the Godfather movies and Chinatown and
Jaws.
Jaws and Network and all the
Alien.
President's Men. Yeah, it's everything. And
We could just shout movies back and
Yeah,
forth, and
yeah,
that would be a
right.
we could just name movies from the 70s and probably would take the same amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
might
mean,
be more interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, early 80s movies, I am embarrassed to admit that I had not seen Chariots of Fire before 6 weeks ago in preparation for this podcast.
I
And
haven't seen
shame
it
on me.
No,
Yeah.
not shame on you. I haven't seen it either. This was
Yeah.
always one. Well, let's pivot to that. This is perfect. This was always one that I just had no interest in. But
Mhm.
worse than that, I watched it yesterday. I had very little idea what this was about. I knew it took place many decades ago. I think I thought it took place in the 30s. It took place in the 20s. It's close.
Yeah.
I knew it involved. I had two things in my mind, and we're gonna get to it in a minute. Well, we'll get to it now. But what I had in my mind was a bunch of guys in white shirts and shorts running on a beach, and the Vangelis music.
Yeah.
And the Vangelis music in 80s movies, we were talking about just a few minutes ago before we started recording, is a scene in the first Vacation movie where Chevy Chase is running to Wally World and they're running in slow motion and they're playing this music. That's 2 years after this. I bet that's not even the first parody. I'm sure there were TV commercials weeks after this movie came out where, like a guy's running to get a Miller Lite and
Yeah.
it's like
It was an instant meme.
Yeah,
Before
I mean,
memes. Yeah.
we're going to talk about the music, not even the music. We're going to talk about the theme. I mean, really just the theme music of this, because that's what people know, myself included. If you say Chariots of Fire, a lot of people, this could be an age thing, but I think a lot of people above a certain age will scat the theme like I just did. So let's move on to Chariots of Fire, but first some stats. And I'm going to throw the last stat to Moskowitz here because he not only was the most prepared, came prepared with his own stat, which I fucking love, but I'm going to do some of the less interesting ones first because his stat is just a killer.
There's nothing cooler than bringing your own stats to the
nothing
party.
cooler than bringing your own stats, but I'm going to give you some, as usual, I'll bring you some stats on Chariots of Fire. This was the first non-American movie since Oliver to win Best Picture. So 13 years. This movie's Best Picture Oscar is displayed at the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, West Yorkshire, England.
Oh,
that is very cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
This is the first time a director did not win along with their Best Picture since The Godfather 9 years earlier. So it was 9 years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. I talk a lot. I talked a lot in the first season about Best Picture, Best Director splits and how rare they were. It only happens twice in the 80s. It happens today's movie and it happens in 1989.
Well,
where the director's not even nominated.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that fits into part of the narrative going into the night and all through the night, which we'll get to. But
yes, because you also watched. Moskowitz watched the ceremony. He went above and beyond the Call of Duty. So
I actually went back in time and attended the ceremony.
He sat behind Warren Beatty.
Yeah, yeah.
And Diane Keaton. Yeah. Yeah. Normally the show is not something that we talk about, but since you did the extra credit homework, feel free to interject with what was going on in the night, because we're going to talk about that in a little bit. This is the first feature for director Hugh Hudson, which puts him on the list of other directors' debut movies winning Best Picture, along with Delbert Mann for Marty, Jerome Robbins for West Side Story, Robert Redford for Ordinary People, James L. Brooks for Terms of Endearment, Kevin Costner for Dances with Wolves, and Sam Mendes for American Beauty. This is 2 movies in a row, since we covered Ordinary People last week, where the first-time director's movie wins Best Picture.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that that's ever happened twice in a row. I mean, actually, I know it hasn't because I'm looking at these. Scratch that. I'm looking at these. I know for a fact that has never happened before.
AI don't lie.
AI. No. This is not fuck AI. I looked this up myself.
Oh, this is real. Oh, all right.
In fact, I'll take this opportunity. I'll cut this out. I asked AI to look up this stat.
Yeah.
Just for expediency's sake, and it couldn't do it. And I'm like, I have on another window on my computer the Academy Awards database wherein I can look this up myself and prove, because I thought about that. I'm like, wait a minute, Hugh Hudson, this is his first movie, which I didn't know. His first narrative feature. He's done some documentaries and things.
Yeah, yeah.
Then that puts him on the list of Redford and James L. Brooks and Costner and all those other people. And ChatGPT couldn't figure that out. Something that was public record.
Yeah,
and so just saying.
Yeah.
At 2 hours and 5 minutes, it is number 43 in ascending length. Number 44 if you count Sunrise, which we'll litigate if that counts in a later episode. It is number 52 on the box office list of Best Pictures with a worldwide gross of $61 million. So Moskowitz, tell me your Oscar stat that you brought. I've got a preview of this, and I think this is kind of amazing.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a little morbid compared to some of those, but it is the most recent Oscars for which all 4 of the acting winners are sadly passed away.
Let's just explain that. Okay, so I want to make sure people understand how cool this stat that he just quoted is, because that means that from 1982 through 2024, at least one actor, if not more than one, is still alive. So in 1981, all 4 of the actors who won Best Actor, Actress, Supporting Actress, are all gone. All of them were old, if not elderly. So it was Henry Fonda, who died months later, I think like 2 months later. Katharine Hepburn, who lived the longest, lived about another 22 years. John Gielgud died, I think, that year. And Maureen Stapleton, who was only 60, she was the youngest. So if the youngest one is 60, she died, maybe 10, 12 years later, whatever it was. So that's an interesting stat. You have to go all the way back to 1981 to have 4 actors where none of them are no longer living. Anyway, I just want to make sure that people understood.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a way, it shows how adult some of these movies were. And Johnny Carson has a funny line at the show, which again I watched, where he says Burt Lancaster, who's incredible, nominated for Best Actor that year for the movie Atlantic City. He's absolutely incredible, and he says, it's a funny year when Burt Lancaster is nominated for Best Newcomer or something like that. So it was just that kind of year. There's a lot that is special and unique about that year.
Yeah, and we'll get into 1981 proper, but let's talk about Chariots of Fire. So I'm gonna start literally right at the open. I mean, I knew nothing about this movie. I knew it was, a historical drama. I knew it was British, like British to the bone, and boy, is this. Um,
Yeah.
so there's sort of this cold open in a church
Yeah.
in 1978,
Yeah.
and then it cuts to the opening credit sequence, and it's literally the only thing I knew about the movie right up top. It's the guys running on the beach in slow motion
Yeah.
and the Vangelis music playing, and I wrote down right to it. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know if that was the climax of the movie. I didn't know if
Right.
that was like some sort of like act two turn. That
Uh-huh.
this is the most. I'll just use the word ignorant that I've gone into any of the hindsighting movies.
Yeah.
Because Lord of the Rings, I'd seen the first one. I had a layman's sense of what Lord of the Rings was going to be, and I'd seen the very first movie 20 plus years ago.
Yeah.
I went into this intentionally, maybe foolishly, just not knowing anything about the plot or anything. So I was just sort of like, oh Jesus, this is like
Yeah. Yeah.
boom out of the gate.
Yeah. It is an amazing opening. I
It
like
is.
you, had not. I think we came to this movie basically in the same mental place.
Right.
I had not seen it. Shame on me again.
Did you know anything
Uh,
about it?
Not really. I mean, I knew it was about runners. I had a vague sense of when in history, but basically I just knew the running on the beach scene.
Yeah.
So, which is what everyone, I think, sadly, I think most people our generation and younger haven't seen this movie. So if
Yeah.
anyone gets anything out of this podcast, go see this movie,
Yes.
please. And the way that it opens in a church and then very quickly to essentially what's like a flashback, and you're not quite sure, at least I'm not quite sure, and thinking about it, I've seen the movie now 3 times. Is this a dream? It's almost like a symbolic memory of something, because this is what's so amazing about this scene. One of the things that's so amazing is it's out of time completely. Like
It's not literal, because
it's
I don't know that these guys
exactly.
ever, because
It's not in the movie. There's
it's
no.
not in the movie. We don't see it in the body of the movie, and we only see it again at the end credits just to show who
Yeah.
the actors are. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I didn't think about that till right this minute, having watched this movie yesterday. But and I only having seen it once, but it is fresh in my mind. I don't even think it's supposed to make literal sense,
Right.
because
Yeah.
Little and Abraham's, I don't think would have been running with all the other dudes. I'm saying I don't think it makes like sort of temporal sense that that scene would have happened. It seems almost like, I don't know if it's a dream sequence, but it's almost like they shot this just for the opening credits. Like I don't know the history behind it, but it almost seems like, oh, let's just shoot this so we get the whole cast together, and there's no dialogue, obviously. And I'm sure Vangelis saw that and was like, oh, great. Like this is
Yeah.
like a pure expression of what this
Yeah,
movie is. 'Cause this is
Well-
a very chatty movie
Yeah.
for how physical it is.
No. I mean, I think we're in complete agreement. I mean, this scene, you don't know. I think if it's literal or it's out of time with the movie.
Yeah.
There's no point in the movie where they talk about we're going to go run on the beach and train.
And you don't see it.
It doesn't make sense that
Yeah.
Little and Abrahams would be. I mean, we'll get to this in a second, but you've got it's unbelievable. You have 2 lead characters in this movie who rarely meet in the movie.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the only scenes that they're there together, which makes you think, oh, maybe this is just a memory of Montague, who's the one speaking at the church,
Right.
thinking back on this, like one of us thinking back on our glory days in high school or college and just remembering all our friends and kind of generally what we were doing. So, it's almost like an emotional and symbolic. And you talk about, Vangelis seeing this so my understanding of what happened here was, uh, David Putnam, the producer, went to Vangelis and said, look, we want to do this scene and we want to do this piece of music that you have from 1977 called L'Enfant. We want to use that for the opening of the movie. So they sort of had this idea.
Oh, it's existing music?
Well, no, it's not. So, but they had in mind this existing piece that Vangelis had done,
Oh.
and then they filmed it to that piece of music, and then they set it to music and they showed it to Vangelis, and he said, "I can do better
Oh,
than
interesting.
this." And they said, "No, this is it." And he said, "No, I can do better. I can do better." They're like, "No, really, we this is exactly what we wanted." He said, "No, I can do better." And he went away on his own and wrote and recorded, it's all him, synth, the theme to Chariots of Fire, and he forced them to listen to it,
Uh-huh.
and they went, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, this is very good."
That's interesting. I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
and that's how it came together. Isn't that
Yeah.
unbelievable?
Yeah. Well, let's just stick with music because we're already talking about it. I have an interesting sort of like push and pull
Hmm.
with the music in this movie. I mean, obviously, let's just stick with this piece, this opening piece. I mean, it's iconic. It's an earworm. It definitely works in this sequence. I think that this is the best part of the score. I don't think it's such a hot take, but I wrote down sort of later on. I wrote down there's a part where they're already in the Olympics. It's pretty late in the movie, and you see, the Americans kind of like practicing. You see all like these guys practicing. I don't
Yeah,
know if the
yeah,
games had
yeah,
started
yeah.
yet, and they have like another sort of synth piece going, and I don't think it works, but I'm of two minds about it because I think what they're doing. I guess my question is this: like, what did you think of the score to this movie? Since we're already on that topic.
Well, I love the score to the movie. I mean,
Okay.
I think
The whole thing.
I
mean,
I do love the whole thing. I think that there are some cues that don't I do bump up against a little bit.
okay.
Part of that I recognize is coming from, we're living here in 2025. We're looking back in time. I saw an interview with Christopher Nolan where he talks about Chariots of Fire, a movie he loves, and the score to it. And I think what's important to recognize that he was saying is that this was, I mean, maybe it wasn't the first time this happened, but it was certainly one of the first times that this happened in a movie, and it was the trailblazer movie
Yeah.
for taking music that was from another era and laying it on top of a period piece from another era. And so you have no Marie Antoinette soundtrack without Chariots of Fire. I mean, that is what led to that.
100%.
And other movies have followed that. But I was watching the movie again yesterday, and I was watching the scene relatively early on, within the first 35, 40 minutes of the film, I think, where Eric Liddell is in that race against the French team, and he gets knocked down, and then he gets back up, and
Great
he
scene. Yeah.
catches all the way up, and they have one of those synth pieces, and I really thought it worked in that scene.
You know what's funny? I think it worked in that scene too. And I'm going to be honest here. I can't tell you I remember the music in that scene, but I thought that scene worked in such totality that the music had to have worked. Because if the music hadn't have worked, I would have remembered it and I would have
Yeah.
written that down.
Yeah.
Because, I'm going to be, without saying what it is, I'm going to be spotlighting two film scores from this year. So I
Oh.
definitely have two other film scores from this year. I definitely have.
I maybe was going to do the same thing.
What's
So
that?
I maybe was going to spotlight the
Well,
same
you
thing.
still can.
Well,
you can spotlight more than one thing. But
yeah, well,
what I'm
yeah.
saying is like I had music, even if your wife hadn't have given me sort of that primer.
Yeah,
I did have music on the brain because, yeah, I think if this is the first time that this has been done, and it may very well be, I think it's an incredibly bold move. And even if it doesn't totally work, I applaud it because it obviously set the stage for other people to do the same thing. I think that I like it in theory because this movie, not only is it about, events that took place almost 60 years before, this is a movie about repressed British characters. This is a stiff upper lip movie. I feel like I have a lot of these in my future with Best Picture winners, So
Yeah.
I think that instinct to like, okay, let's modernize it. Like if this movie had been made a few years earlier, they might have put like a disco soundtrack on that. I'm not saying that would have worked, but if they
Right.
made this movie in 1975 or something, whenever disco was at its height, I don't know what that is.
Right,
Let's say
right.
it was like made 6 years earlier, the composer might have said like, well, let's put like, let's put like a disc, or if they made this in like 1997, they might have, let's have like a techno soundtrack to this movie set in 1924. I'm not saying those are good ideas,
Yeah,
that those would have
a
worked.
grunge thing. If
A
it was
grunge
in the
thing,
yeah.
I'm not saying these are the same thing and that these are good ideas, but I do think it's principally the same thing. I think it's a very cool idea. Maybe I'm just bumping on the track in that scene that I'm talking about, where they're just sort of, I'm also just not super into that scene. It's like I feel like we're too far away from things.
Which scene is it?
So it's just a scene where they're like on a field and like you just see everybody kind of just practicing.
Oh yeah.
It's late in the movie,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's kind of a montage. They're just kind of banging around this field. Maybe I
Yeah.
just don't like that track, and I'm extrapolating it. But Yeah, the music was definitely
Yeah, maybe.
something.
I mean, here's what I will say though. I mean, I think that um, looking back with modern ears, I mean, I think that the score is excellent. I mean, I think it's
And
a
it wins the
genius
Oscar. It's one of the
score.
things this
It
movie
it, it
won.
it wins the Oscar. It's I think the score is a monster in a year of monster scores. It's not the only monster score that year.
No, I'm going
Uh,
to talk about two that
yeah,
weren't even nominated, but you're
and
right.
I think that I respect any opinion today that says, well, that score doesn't quite work for them all the way, or there's a couple, I feel like there's a couple cues that don't quite work for me.
Mhm.
But here's what the sense that I have digging back into the archives and watching the old ceremony and talking to some baby boomers who were, 30 years old when this movie came out. The score worked then.
Yes.
In 1981, no one was bumping up against the score. I mean, I hate to say no one, but like this worked
Well, this movie was a
in that
hit.
moment.
This movie
Yeah.
was a hit, and I think in
A
the
huge surprising hit
yeah, and I
that
think
people loved.
and I mentioned this in the 2000s because the last not the so we covered a couple episodes ago we covered The Hurt Locker, which was and is the lowest grossing Best Picture winner of all time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it made about $17 million and like 49 worldwide. And in the 80s and 90s, and certainly in the 70s, you were not going to win Best Picture unless your movie was either a healthy hit or a blockbuster. That's not to say that your movie wasn't good, but there was no way for.
Well, that was one of the problems Reds had a little bit,
Mm,
honestly. I think they were a little worried because their box office was okay,
right,
but they were up against Raiders, which was the biggest movie of the year and
right,
Paramount's biggest movie of all time
right,
to that point. Number 2 movie of the year was On Golden Pond,
right.
$300 million,
All
I
these are
think.
nominated for Best Picture.
Yeah. And number 7 was Chariots of Fire,
Right.
which
So
was
all these
yeah.
movies are the best pick. I mean, I think you just did all five. I mean, like did we skip anything? No. Yeah, all
Well,
five.
Atlantic City, I don't remember how that did, but
Atlantic City
yeah,
Atlantic City might have been like the art house one.
yeah,
Atlantic City definitely was not a blockbuster, but I think in the 80s period, I think if something bombed, it just bombed and went away. And I think, but they also let movies play so much longer. I remember, and maybe
yeah.
you do too. I mean, the biggest movie of 1986 was Top Gun. It was in theaters for a year. The last time that happened was Titanic. I'm not even sure Titanic made it the full year.
Mhm.
I mean, it obviously, but it was out for months and months and months. You just wouldn't
Yeah.
see that today for a litany of reasons we don't
Yeah,
even have to
yeah.
go into. But yeah, I think, yeah, I think that the music definitely worked then, and I think it was definitely a way to kind of communicate to a modern audience that this is a story worth your time. And so I definitely applaud it as sort of an instrument to do that. I think it was very smart to not, you know, an orchestral score, a lush orchestral score for this
Yeah.
might, even as beautiful as I'm sure it would have been, probably would have diminished this movie's box office in a weird way.
Yeah.
I mean, not
yeah.
like that a score is solely responsible, but I feel like it would have. I think the music is a big piece of, certainly a big piece of this movie's legacy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and look, all you need to know is that opening scene. To me, we're watching movies and some of us are writing movies or trying to make movies. You want to connect with an audience on an emotional level, and that's what determines whether a movie works or not. And here is, you're a minute into this movie and you're feeling emotions and you don't even know what the movie's really about yet. Like the movie hasn't gotten going yet,
Yeah.
but just with the imagery
Yeah.
and the music and what's happening, you are feeling emotional. And now the story starts and you don't even know yet that this movie is about 2 lead characters, one battling anti-Semitism and the other one running to his Christianity.
Right.
I mean, off we go. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
holy moly.
I want to say one last thing about the music because I feel like I've been picking on Vangelis a little bit. I do think that the very next year he does a score for Blade Runner,
Yeah.
which is obviously set in the future.
Yeah.
That score is really amazing.
Yeah.
It's so evocative, and I think plays just as big a role in enveloping you in the world of that movie as his score for this movie does. Blade Runner's not hurting for admirers,
Yeah.
but Blade Runner was not a hit, infamously. But the score, for a movie that's set almost 40 years in the future,
Mhm.
you watch the movie now, we're now past when Blade Runner is set in 2019. That score still works. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel
yeah, yeah.
dated. Everything in that movie still works. Everything about that movie feels otherworldly and futuristic, even though we know that it was incorrect about the flying
It's a
cars and all the
very
other stuff.
strong it's a very strong 2-year run.
So let's talk about the movie itself. So yeah, I didn't know that this was a movie. It took me a while to figure out. Okay, I thought it was going to be about Abrahams,
Mhm.
and then they cut to Little,
Eric Liddell, yeah.
Eric Little, and then I was like, okay, and then I figured out, okay, well these guys are going to meet at some point,
Right, right.
and I didn't
Yeah.
know this movie was about anti-Semitism, and I didn't know that this was about, well, really just faith in general. But what's interesting about it is that, you know, Abrahams is not even really culturally Jewish. He's only Jewish enough that he's encountering anti-Semitism, and it's anti-Semitism. Nobody, nobody calls him, any racial slurs. It's just like, oh, with a name like Abraham's, he better run, or whatever
Right,
whatever
right.
they
Or so,
say.
oh, what does his father do? Oh, he's a financier.
Right.
Oh, well,
It's
the,
so
one of the
so
things I
contained.
think is great about this movie is that I think it's a beautifully made, layered, nuanced, restrained movie. And a mutual friend of ours and I were talking about this movie the other day, and he was commenting that if they made this movie today, the studio execs would be like, no, you got to show the anti-Semitism. You got to
Yeah.
have a rock going through the window
Yeah.
and all this stuff, and you've got to have them booing Eric Liddell when he doesn't want to run on Sunday and all this stuff. And I think sadly there's some truth to that.
Well,
The mo-
School Ties, which is a good movie, but they put a swastika on Brendan Fraser's door. That's only 10 years, 11 years after this movie, you know, and it's a similar, I mean, it's in America, but it's in a prep school. I mean, these guys are freshmen in college, and the
yeah,
kids in that movie, I think, are like seniors in a prep school.
yeah.
And even in that movie, it's got to be so vitriolically, which I'm not saying is inaccurate, but I
Mm.
think he's right. I think it would be a rock through his
Yeah.
window and swastika. Well, I guess there wouldn't be swastikas because it's 1924.
I think that this movie is doing a lot of work in a very um, beautiful and restrained way.
Mhm.
And the themes that it, puts forward, by the time you're at the end of this movie, you have, on an emotional level, you're very inspired and feeling, amazing and great about what the team has done.
Mhm.
But you've also really uh, gone through a whirlwind of character arcs about the human struggle. I mean, what I think this movie is really about at its core, and why I love this movie, is I think it's about why we it's about what drives us. This movie is about what drives us when it's not about like working some job to put food on the table. What makes us run a race? What makes us want to write movies? What makes us want to do a podcast? What makes us do these things that we're driven to do? Play basketball, play baseball. And here you have two characters who are driven to run for two very different reasons. For one, it's very connected to his Christianity, to his faith. He's a very religious. Eric Little's character is,
He admonishes a kid for playing rugby on the Sabbath,
Yeah,
which in
absolutely.
his case is Sunday, not Saturday. So, which
which
yeah,
is a setup for later, of
exactly.
course. Yeah, but and then you've got Abraham's, who is running to show the anti-Semitic aristocracy that they're not going to keep him down. I mean, he's more of like a chip on the shoulder kind of guy. And so, and you mentioned this. One of the things another thing I love about this movie is that while it seems to be, from a certain angle, just a Cinderella sports movie, like Rocky or something like that.
Yeah, you definitely got some Rocky vibes from the Ian Holm character.
Yeah, there's certainly some Rocky vibes, and in a good way. Like, there's a lot of comfort and familiarity in that. But this is actually, and Christopher Nolan talks about this a lot with it's actually a pretty unconventional, idiosyncratic, odd movie. I mean, imagine this pitch. You've got a dual lead character situation. You got two lead characters who barely meet in the movie. They're rivals. They're set up they have one race early on, and then the movie's, kind of clearly set up for them to meet again at the end and race, and it just never happens.
Yeah, they never compete against each other. They're on the same Olympic team.
Yeah.
And there isn't...
And they're supporting each other.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine pitching that.
Yeah.
The studio execs would be like, well, no, obviously they have to race at the end. And
right.
So it takes a lot of guts to have a narrative like that. Now, some may say that's a flaw in the screenwriting, in the movie making, but I actually think it's a strength, and it shows that it's actually an unconventional movie. I also think that I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea that this is a stuffy British movie. I think that I actually agree with you that in the 80s, sometimes the Oscar winners for Best Picture are a little disconnected from the 80s aesthetic as a whole, and they are, can be kind of stuffy. But I don't think that's this one. I don't think that's this movie.
A couple things. Yeah, I mean, this movie technically, it's not a Hollywood movie. This is a British movie. I mean, a Hollywood studio distributed it.
Yeah.
I think the Lad Company or somebody like that, or Warner Brothers. I don't have it in front of me. But this, like I read in the beginning, this is the first non-American movie to win Best Picture in 13 years. So in a way, this is kind of like Parasite winning, but for the fact that it's not any foreign language.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, Parasite, I don't think had an American distributor, and that's something that gets a little bit lost here. It's like, it's not a movie. I mean, this is a British production. It's British through and through. The cast is British.
Yeah.
The crew is British.
It's a small indie British production.
Right.
With no stars in the lead roles. It has some well-known actors in the supporting roles. It has
like Ian Holm was an Alien, so he's a familiar face, but he's not someone you can hang a movie around. Even in a supporting role.
I mean, John Gielgud is probably the most well-known, but his part is small.
He's kind of like Brando in Superman. John Gielgud's a great actor.
Right.
He wins the Oscar this very year for Arthur for Best Supporting Actor, which is why most people would know him. I'm sure John Gielgud was probably like, oh, let's have a familiar face. He probably only shot a couple days on this. So I think in the British terms of this movie, it was like, oh, let's get Brando to play Jarrell.
Right.
Just to have.
Was John Gielgud reading his lines off cue cards that people were holding?
I think John Gielgud was very prepared. I'm sure to his last day. John Gielgud has a line he says in that scene you just talked about, when Abrahams wins the race. I think it's Gielgud who says, I wrote this down because I thought it was really funny. Perhaps they are God's chosen people after all.
Right.
I thought that was a great line.
Yeah, and I think the very next line is one of them says, "I bet there's no faster person in Great Britain," and then they cut to Eric Liddle, and that's when all of a sudden, you're like, "Oh, well, what character am I following now?"
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, I don't know if I find this movie stuffy. I think some things about it really work, and there's some things about it that I really bump on. I think some things about it technically are really interesting. There's a scene, it's pretty early on where they're like walking around, like signing up for clubs, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's like one shot,
Yeah,
and they
yeah.
did not have a steady cam. And it's like, I mean,
Yeah,
the steady cam did exist, but I could tell they weren't using a steady
yeah,
cam. Steady cam
it's
was,
kind of ahead of its time, that
yeah.
shot.
I
Yeah.
was, I'm watching this. I'm like, is this a fucking oneer?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because
it is.
it's like that's very flashy if for a movie like this. That I mean, the movie's very well shot, but like the oneer is like something you would see like in like Boogie Nights or
Right, right, right.
Goodfellas or I mean any Alfonso Cuarón movie. So but it's so subtle because it's just like I was like, wow, this has like been like one take, and it's like it's. I would imagine these guys all have like stage training. The
Yeah,
actors, it
yeah.
just
Well,
felt like it was sort of
yeah.
unfolding, and like we're going here, we're going there.
No, I mean it
Did
is
you notice
very.
that?
Absolutely. I noticed that right away.
Yeah.
I that is connected a little bit to where I'm going to push back on it being stuffy. I mean, look, it's certainly about a certain period of time, uh, post World War II, British aristocracy, and this is
It
sort
was
of
pre
where
World War II.
it's.
It's 1924.
Oh, sorry, I meant post World War One. But yeah, pre World War II, post World War One. Post World War One is sort of when the aristocracies,
Yeah.
diminish in Europe, and I think that this movie, again, indie, low budget. They had to make it quick. They had to. They were. Hugh Hudson was a commercial director,
That's what I'm
and
saying. This is his first feature.
yeah, and he was, he was chosen because David Putnam knew him very well. He was like a second unit director on something they had done. They'd known each other for 20 years. But I have wondered, and this is just speculation, if he was also chosen in part because he knew how to do things quickly.
Well,
Because they did
commercial
not have a lot
director.
of money.
Yeah.
They did not have a lot of time. This was a real off beaten path movie. But one of the other reasons I say this is not a stuffy movie is because uh, the irony is this movie became embraced by the British establishment and Great Britain as a whole as a real you know, uh, identity movie for Great Britain, kind of versus the U.S.
Mhm.
But the reality is that this movie is taking the piss out of the Great Britain establishment. That's what
Yeah.
it's actually an irreverent, subversive movie in a very British way,
Right.
which is different than how we would do it here. But it became such a hit that in a meta way, similar to how the characters embrace Abrahams and Eric Liddell because they end up being the best, even though they're Jewish and Scottish, and they're looking down on both of them the whole movie.
Right.
Great Britain embraced this movie, which is actually trying to give it to the Great Britain establishment the whole time, and then it became like, this symbol of Great Britain. And when it comes over here, Colin Weiland, when he wins Best Screenplay Oscar, he says, "Watch out, the British are coming." This became a symbol of
Right.
being British, and so everything got totally turned on its head. But I would argue that this is a movie that maybe at first blush, or maybe if you haven't seen it at all, might seem like, oh, this is probably one of those stuffy Oscar Best Picture movies. But it's really not that at all. And if you go back in time to 1981, you realize this was a small movie that came out of nowhere. It was a Cinderella story. It ended up winning this Oscar because it was loved by people. It was a surprise hit. And the Academy that year voted for movies that they loved. I mean, the movies that were really loved that year were Raiders of the Lost Ark, Chariots of Fire, and On Golden Pond. And because of those movies, the Oscars turned out differently than some people were anticipating, and certainly Warren Beatty was hoping. But
Yeah.
and that's what happened. So Chariots of Fire was a Cinderella movie that people genuinely loved, and when it won, it was a surprise. But you can watch the footage, you can feel it in the room. It was a happy surprise. People were thrilled when it won.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I guess it's not unlike Rocky 5 years earlier. I mean, and that's obviously going to be.
But it's a better movie, I would say.
You think it's better than Rocky?
I would say. I
Love-
mean, and I think Rocky's a great movie.
Love the take. It's interesting because you talked about. I want to just follow up on one thing when the screenwriter said the British are coming. It's interesting because it just popped in my head when you told me that. I did not know that anecdote. I mean, if you look at what unfolds over the next 10 years, at least in front of the camera, who's coming? Kenneth Branagh, Daniel Day-Lewis, Gary Oldman,
Yeah.
Colin Firth.
Well, Gandhi wins the next year.
Yeah,
Another
well,
British movie.
Ben Kingsley. Yeah, There's so many British actors. Jeremy Irons, another one. I mean, and a lot of these guys win Oscars. I mean, the very end of the
Yeah,
decade,
yeah,
Daniel
yeah.
Day-Lewis wins his first of 3 Oscars from My Left Foot, and you definitely see kind of a British invasion, and all those guys made movies in Great Britain and then came over to America, and they're all still around. I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is in a movie this year. So that's just kind of what popped in my mind. Um, yeah, I think that's interesting that like the Cinderella story aspect of it, and yeah, all the movies you named. I mean, Raiders. Just sticking with Raiders,
Hmm.
Golden Pond, and this won something like 10 or 12 Oscars between them. You know,
Oh
I,
yeah,
I mean, just
yeah.
between them, not knowing so it's interesting. The
There's a
wealth
version. Yeah,
was spread pretty equally. I don't know if Atlantic
yeah.
City won any Oscars, but the other 4 movies
It
won.
didn't.
Okay, but the
Yeah.
other 4 movies won 2 or more Oscars.
Hmm.
I know Raiders wins 4. I know this wins 4. I know All Golden Pond wins at least 2, maybe 3, and Reds wins 3.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
some
yeah,
that's rare now. I mean, obviously with
yeah,
10
yeah.
nominees, that's but like I remember thinking when we still had 5 nominees, which we do this year, I remember thinking it was cool if every movie won at least 1. I'm not saying that has to be a rule,
Yeah.
but I remember thinking it's like an interesting night if every movie gets something above or below the line. We can debate that all night long.
I have another stat for you if you want an interesting
Yes,
stat.
please.
You reminded me of this when you were talking about Atlantic City. This was only the second time, 1967 being the first time, that 3 movies were nominated for all of the Big 5 awards. Best Picture, Screenplay, Director, and Best Actor and Actress. It was
So-
On Golden Pond,
Okay.
Reds,
Yeah.
and Atlantic City.
So 3. So oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that
Atlantic
hadn't
City
happened
won
in 14
nothing,
years.
but that hadn't correct. Yeah, and I don't know if it's happened since. I don't think
I don't
so.
know. Since we're seem to be in stat world, Reds.
This is a cool place to be, everybody.
Yes. Reds had an acting nomination in all 4 acting categories: actor, actress, supporting actor, supporting
Yeah, yeah.
actress. That didn't happen again until The Silver Linings Playbook 31 years later, and that hasn't happened since.
Yeah,
I'm talking about just about nominations. No movie's ever won all 4 acting Oscars. A few
Yeah.
movies have won 3,
Yeah.
including Everything Everywhere All at Once did it most recently. I had a question about something. Maybe you can explain. There's a part of the movie I didn't follow exactly. Maybe we'll cut this out, but I just couldn't quite twig something. So when Gielgud and Lindsay Anderson call Ben Cross into like a meeting, and they're basically saying, "Oh, you're training with what's Ian Holm's name? Something with the Ian Holm character."
Yeah.
And are they against that because they're racist because this guy's Arabic? It's because like he's not part of Cambridge. Like, what is their fucking beef? I didn't quite follow. Is it both?
Yeah. Well, so the sense that I had, and there's parallels between this scene and the scene where they bring Eric Liddell into that room, and what's his name? The Prince of Wales is there.
Oh yeah,
and
they gang up on him,
and they're trying to convince him
to run
to run, and someone comes up with the idea, well, if we get the French to move this thing or that, and then someone says, well, we can't, it would be against British pride if we asked them to. And there's this sort of like sense of the British aristocracy then that you had to behave in a certain way. I mean, it's such it's so different than how we think in America. They old school British aristocracy looked down on people who made money or did things that weren't elegant. Like if you were new money and you were working and you were the bourgeoisie, that wasn't cool.
Riche, yeah.
It was only cool to have money and not be working.
Right.
Whereas in America, we sort of worship people who make money. But so to me, it was like that vibe of like we have this this is how we have to be. You're not going to be a bad Brit, are you? And that to me is why this movie is subversive, and why it is really going after, those 2 scenes are examples why this movie is really going after the British establishment, and why it's ironic to me that it was then embraced by the British establishment later. Now, of course, 1981 Britain is very different than 1920, Britain that they're poking fun of. But that was one of the aims of this movie, and it was to show that these two men both stick to their beliefs, their core beliefs. They're not going to be swayed off of it. I think one of the sub lessons of the movie is, if you don't do things your way, you're not going to succeed. So
Right.
you do things your way. Especially with the Eric Little character.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that scene is about. And the idea of having a trainer was considered like, why would you need a trainer? We're the best. You don't need a trainer.
Okay.
We're, so and so college, which, by the way, Cambridge at the last minute, because all the college stuff takes place in Cambridge at the movie. At the last minute, Cambridge got nervous because they didn't want to be viewed poorly.
Yeah.
Oh, there wasn't any anti-Semitism here in the 20s. You must be mistaken. And they so a lot of that stuff was filmed at Eton, and Cambridge later regretted that they
Right.
pulled out as the movie was embraced in
Sure.
Great Britain.
It's interesting because I mentioned in our stats that the Best Picture Oscar is displayed as like this thing of national pride. I'm trying to
Yeah.
think. I don't know if this is the best example, but like imagine if like, the Best Picture Oscar for Platoon was like, displayed in Philadelphia as like, oh, we're so proud that Platoon won,
Yeah.
where it's a very harsh critique
Yeah.
of America's role in that war.
Yeah.
I'm not making a one-to-one comparison there.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
what popped in my mind, when we were talking about sort of the national pride around a movie. I'm going to Platoon because it's a Best Picture winner about
Yeah.
a war and is very critical of America despite not taking place there.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the funny thing. I think this movie is the old phrase, you can hold different ideas in your head at once, even if they're conflicting. That's one of the things this movie does so well, because it also is about British pride. I mean, at the end of this movie, they're conquering the Americans, and these two guys who, against all odds,
Right.
and the glory of the British team, and by this time in the movie, because of the Vangelis music, you're like already cued emotionally.
Right.
If you didn't know you were supposed to start crying, the music tells you you're supposed to start crying.
But we never hear the music. We never hear the Vangelis opening theme again. And I'm wondering,
Right.
they
Until
obviously they
until
didn't
the
know
end.
what they had. They didn't know it was going to become this iconic hit. There's no way to know that.
Yeah,
In fact,
yeah.
if you know that, then that's not what's going to happen. But I think that, not to go back to the music thing again, but I just was expecting that music to happen at a climactic moment. I don't have a problem with the music that they did use, but I was just
Yeah.
waiting for when one of those guys.
I also did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, well, that's where they're going to play it again.
They have to call back to this, and we don't hear it again until the end credits.
But, again, in a way, and look, that probably is a function of they didn't know what they had to a degree.
Yeah. Well, how could they?
But that's also part of what appeals to me about this movie is that it's like, well, of course they're going to play that music during the last race.
Right.
And then they don't. Well, of course, at the end of the movie, these two guys are going to run against each other. No, they don't. And it's not really even like a big deal in the narrative. It just sort of doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you realize over time that it's not going to. And so that unconventional structure and those unconventional choices, I think really make it a unique movie, while at the same time there's a lot of familiarity, and you've got the underdog sports story that works, and it all kind of comes together to make a film that is simultaneously artsy and interesting and unconventional and subversive, but also a feel-good, movie that feels like Rocky at the end.
Well, actually, I want to push back on that part of it because I think when Little wins, it feels like Rocky, but when Abrahams wins, there's this really interesting thing where he wins and he's in, like, I guess, the locker room, and everyone's trying to congratulate him, and he walks out and someone says, like, leave him alone, winning is really hard to swallow.
Oh, yeah.
And I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
such an interesting
Yeah,
thing because
yeah.
the Abrahams character, I think Ben Cross is really terrific in this movie. All the actors are I think, uniformly great. But I think what's interesting about it is that, him winning is something he can't handle.
Yeah.
We've seen him lose and be very petulant about it, even self-awarely petulant, because, like, when he loses to Little the first time, he's like, he's a better runner. I respect him. This isn't about it being unfair. I'm mad at myself for losing. We see how hard he is on himself. And when he wins, he can't enjoy it. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And maybe
yeah.
something they could have delved into a little more, but maybe it's better that they didn't. Maybe it's better if they went into it a little more. I might be sitting here saying they should have pulled back on that. But I thought that was interesting. I mean, I wrote that down. Winning is hard to swallow. I don't know that I've seen.
Well, because when you
that in
catch
another-
what you're chasing for, you may realize that it doesn't fill you.
Yeah, like because it's like these guys. I mean, they're all young. They're all college age. I mean, the actors are at least 10 years too old to be playing these parts, but that's fine. It's uniform.
Right.
But it's like you
Yeah.
do sort of wonder because the movies. I don't think the framing device of this movie works particularly well because I don't know why we're with those two characters. It reminded me in a negative way of the opening of Lawrence of Arabia, just that they're in this church, and I think it's Lawrence's funeral because in
Mhm.
the opening credits of that movie he gets killed, and in a really silly way, given what a warrior he was. And that might be what they were going for. I'm not just best picture branding this, but I didn't quite understand
Why it started
why.
in the church?
What's
Is that
that?
you didn't
Why it started
understand?
and ended
Yeah.
in the church, and why we had to see these two pretty ancillary characters in old age makeup. It just felt like, as a framing device, I thought it kind of was limp
Got it. Got it. Got it.
for me. I don't
Yeah,
know if you
yeah.
bumped on that. Sounds like you didn't.
I no, there's very little that I bumped on in the movie, honestly. I mean, it was a couple of the music cues.
Right.
Look, I mean, there's some scenes where you pointed one out where they're practicing in the field. I mean, that's like pretty generic, whatever.
Right.
Didn't inspire me. But overall, I really thought this was a very beautiful, special movie. I mean, I think that the framing device was probably a result of how the movie was put together. So Harold Abrahams was a big deal. After the events of this movie, he became both of them actually. Eric Liddell as well became a big deal, and in Great Britain society, and he was like the minister of sport or something. I apologize because I know I'm getting this wrong, but
Right.
essentially he was
They were
he,
dignitaries. They became dignitaries of
yeah,
Great Britain.
and he passed away just as this movie was getting going. And I believe the story is David Putnam, the producer, didn't have a chance to talk to Harold Abrahams before he passed away, but he did have a chance to go to the funeral. And at the funeral, um, I think Montague was there, and Montague's letters that he reads, which is also one of the framing devices in this movie, that's based in real stuff. So, you know, that's one of those things where, as a writer, and I'm a writer who sometimes works in trying to adapt true stories,
This is right in your
and
wheelhouse. This is one of the reasons I gave you this movie because
yeah,
just knowing peripherally what it was about, it's the kind of thing that you write. It's sort of obscure historic, history
yeah,
that has to be brought to life. So that's why it's something that I thought you were sort of
yeah,
cast
yeah.
for this
Well,
movie that I knew very little
you were
about.
right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I
But
was
I
like,
knew
yeah,
just on the surface, superficially, that like this is the kind of thing that even if you didn't like it, you would at least appreciate, oh, well, this is the kind of thing that I'm
yeah.
into.
Yeah, yeah. Well, listen, you were right. But I think specifically with the church and that framing device, I think for better or for worse, I think they got there because real life led them there. I think that's where they started.
That's fine.
And
I
then you
accept
go
that.
down a path, and so I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind.
Mm.
So have you thought at all about why Harold Abrahams's funeral scene is in a church?
Was that his funeral?
That's his funeral
Oh, I don't think I
because he converted to Christianity in real life.
did he really?
The Jewish character in this movie, who is battling anti-Semitism, and that's
Yeah.
one of his driving force. Later in life, converted to Christianity.
I'm not surprised because I tried to make the point earlier. I don't think that Abrahams was all that religious, and his father probably wasn't either. I don't, and
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting distinction between him and Little is that like Little is
Mhm.
staunchly devout. I mean, like if Little were Jewish, he would be an Orthodox black hat. I don't know what that is in
Yeah, yeah.
Christianity, but just the fact that he keeps his Sabbath, the fact that I mean, was he a missionary?
He was a missionary, and he's preaching, and
Is that woman his
yeah.
sister, by the way?
Yeah,
That is his I thought
yeah,
it
it's
was his
supposed to be his
sister.
sister. Who, by the way, in my understanding is in real life, his sister was very supportive of his running. This was just artistic license, and they make her look like a villain a little bit. But
Not a villain. I did think it was unnecessary. Well, that's actually a double segue because one thing about this movie I really don't think worked at all
Mhm.
is Abraham's girlfriend. I don't it's I don't think it's necessarily the actor who I don't know. I think this character is very thinly drawn. You were talking about how if a studio made this movie, you'd have to have these guys have a big showdown and all the studio tropes. This felt like a studio trope. This felt like this thinly drawn woman who I like the way he like sees her on stage. I think that's really, no pun intended, well staged. And I even kind of like their first date where she takes him to the restaurant. I just think everything that comes after
Yeah,
that, it's
they seem to have good chemistry, actually.
well, it's not about the chemistry. I just think her character is so synthetic and such a vessel for just exposition, which is very modern of this
I
movie.
did think that was one of the weaker points
Okay.
of the movie.
It,
Yeah,
it, it wasn't like ruinous, but I just felt like I just yeah, I feel like I just felt like she was pointless because he's got so many people to talk to. He's got his coach, he's got the other players, so it's like everything that he's saying to her. And this movie's not a love story, nor do I need it to be. It just didn't. Yeah, I felt like she was a bit of a speed bump in this movie. That's not
Well,
particularly
I did think
long.
that with that one scene where she's, kind of telling him off, he's all upset about losing,
Yeah,
and
that scene's well
that's a
written,
good scene.
but
Yeah.
then what happens 10 seconds later is Ian Holm walks up and says, "I can get you 2 more yards." Why couldn't have he could have said all that to Ian Holm, because I think Ian Holm's good in this movie, but he disappears for a lot of stretches of it.
Mhm.
It's very choppy. Like every time he would come back, I'm like, "Oh, we haven't seen this guy in a while." And he should have been, I mean, we talked about Rocky a little bit. I mean, he is sort of like the Mickey. I'm not saying that like he was constructed that way, but
Yeah. Yeah.
he is like the Burgess Meredith character.
Yeah.
And it's funny, in the very first episode, Gladiator, Joe Russo and I talked about how Gladiator, this was his take, was like Rocky, and that the Oliver Reed character was like Mickey, just in terms of like,
Mhm.
these big fights, and he's this warrior. So
It is what it is, but it's unique and unconventional, and I think um, I think that they should get, some kudos for that, but some people might bump up against it.
well, they won
I
the
totally get
Academy
it.
Award for Best Picture, so it's this movie.
Yeah, they did all
Yeah.
right.
Um, yeah. So let's pivot. So you've already talked about why you felt this won, meaning like
Yeah.
why, whether or not you think it deserves to, we'll get to in a minute, but
Yeah.
you felt like this was a popular movie, sort of a Cinderella story. Um, this was a surprise because going into Oscar night.
Yeah.
So was Reds the front runner going into Oscar night?
The best sense that I have, from the last few weeks of sort of trying to immerse myself in the era and watch the ceremony and read the trades at the time. Reds was certainly the front runner going into award season.
Okay.
As award season unfolded, I think there started to be well, maybe it's going to be On Golden Pond vibe going on. People loved On Golden Pond. There was a lot of momentum for Henry Fonda to win the Oscar for Best Actor. There started to be a sense of, well, maybe it's going to be On Golden Pond. I don't think it was ever Chariots of Fire was a movie that a lot of people liked the best. And a lot of people liked Raiders the best. And a lot of people liked Atlantic City the best.
Right.
But when you go into that night, I think the feeling is probably Reds, but there's a pretty good shot that it's On Golden Pond.
Right.
And that's where everyone's head's at. And then you see the night unfold.
So let's talk about categorically denied. Before we get to Best Picture, let's see if Chariots of Fire was worthy of the other 3 Oscars that it won. So it wins Best Original Screenplay. It beats Absence of Malice, Arthur, Atlantic City, and Reds. I've actually seen all of these movies. So what do you say? Do you think Chariots of Fire keeps its Best Original Screenplay Oscar against those 4 movies that you've seen, that you remember?
I've seen them all.
Okay.
And I do. I think it deserved that award.
Best Original Screenplay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's close. There's a lot of good stuff there.
Yeah.
But I would pick it over Reds. I would pick it barely over Atlantic City. Because I think a lot of what makes Atlantic City special to me is the direction. Anyway, yes, I think it deserved that award.
Yeah, for me, and I've seen all 5 of these, which is sort of rare as far as a sort of a category like this. I would put Chariots of Fire. I'd say it's comparable to Reds in terms that it's doing a very similar thing. It's taking this relatively obscure part of history, very similar time period. I mean, Reds is before this, but Reds is like maybe
It's
like
true.
a
It is kind
decade.
of the same time.
It's
kind of
almost, I mean,
funny,
it overlaps. I mean, Reds
Yeah.
is like the 1915, and I think it goes into the 20s.
Yeah.
But I would agree about Atlantic City, having just watched it this morning. I don't think the screenplay is what works best about that movie. But I have to say, I would it would be between Absence of Malice and Arthur for me. I think Arthur's an extremely well written movie.
Hmm.
I think it's incredibly funny. I think it has like this undercurrent of kind of sadness because the main character is a high functioning alcoholic. And I think that's played for laughs for most of the movie. But I think as he gets sober, he starts to see how empty his life is.
Yeah, yeah.
And the movie's still funny and still poignant, but I remember Nicolas Cage saying that when he won the Oscar for Leaving Las Vegas, he watched 4 performances of like drunk characters, and Arthur was one of them. And when he mentioned that,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I never even thought about that. I never
Yeah,
thought about the
yeah.
fact that Dudley Moore is drunk for so much of the movie. And then, it's an interesting movie.
It's a
You
great
know,
movie. That Arthur's probably my number 2 pick for screenplay.
yeah. I also really love, I would go between Arthur or Absence of Malice,
Mhm.
which only gets 3 nominations this year, but this is one of them. Absence of Malice, for people who don't know, it's a Sidney Pollack movie with Paul Newman and Sally Field. And I think it's a really terrific movie about journalism, about the abuse of power.
Mhm.
I think it's just a really great drama. So I don't know what to choose between those two, but I'm definitely taking the original screenplay Oscar away from Chariots of Fire.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
Best costume design, Chariots of Fire beats The French Lieutenant's Woman,
Mhm.
Pennies from Heaven,
Mhm.
Ragtime, and Reds. What say you?
It did not deserve this one. And I
Okay.
think this one was the canary in the coal mine that told you something was up on Oscar night.
Interesting.
I would probably give this one to Reds.
Yeah,
But there's a lot of good movies here.
costume design's a tough one. Yeah, I mean, Reds and Chariots are the only ones that I've seen. Pennies from Heaven is a very famous. Well, I don't know if it was a hit, but that's a very famous, or has a growing reputation. It's a musical with Steve Martin set in I think the 30s, and Ken Adam did the sets, and yeah. So I mean, costume design I feel like is fairly merit based, so not that political. I know that Milena Canonero did the costumes for Chariots of Fire, and she'd won an Oscar earlier for Barry Lyndon and has won, I think, a few times since then.
Yeah, yeah.
She's obviously incredibly skilled at what she does. I don't have a strong feeling about this. I mean, yeah, I think the costumes in Chariots were fine. I'm fine giving it to Reds also. I don't have a strong feeling about this one. Let's talk about something
Yeah.
that we've already talked about a bit. Best score. So Chariots of Fire beats Dragon Slayer, On
Yeah.
Golden Pawn,
Yeah.
Ragtime, and of course Raiders of the Lost Ark. So
Yes.
what say you?
Oh, I have thought about this one because I knew this question was coming.
Yeah.
I think it deserved this one.
You think? Okay.
Yes, I do. I think it was. I think the score for Chariots of Fire and the score for Raiders of the Lost Ark are 2 monsters
Yeah.
that are in the same year. And these are, if there's a top 10 scores of all time, they're probably both in it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I do think it deserved that. And I would also say that if you transport yourself back to 1981, those people felt it deserved it even more than we would feel today. Like it was such a ubiquitous score.
Sure.
By the time this ceremony was happening, it was going to win. That was not a surprise win.
Yeah. It's funny because you know what I thought about watching this movie? Did you see the Behind the Candelabra, the Liberace movie that Soderbergh made?
No, I didn't.
I bring it up for this one reason. So in the scope of the movie, at one point it's 1982, and Michael Douglas plays Liberace.
Yeah, he plays at the Oscars.
Right, he plays
Right,
at the
yeah.
Oscars, and he's saying to someone, says, "Oh, I keep hearing this Vangelis kid on the radio. He's going to win the Oscar."
Yeah.
And I think that it's just a throwaway line.
Yeah.
But I think this was probably on the radio a ton.
Yeah. Oh, it was. Yeah.
This was probably, again, I knew this music when I was, my son is 7. I was probably 7 when, I was not 7 when this movie came out, but I knew that music. I'll give my answer. For me, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't think that Chariots winning is any kind of like, how could it be? Because I understand it. I think the reason I give it to Raiders is because, look, they both do the same thing. They're totally iconic. Everybody knows the Indiana Jones theme. Obviously there's been 5 Indiana Jones movies, so Raiders is given way to the whole the theme is in all 5 movies.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I mean by that is that like everybody can tell you, everybody can scat and hum both these themes. It's a little bit more, on the one hand, it's like more of an accomplishment for Chariots of Fire, which has no pop cultural imprint other than the music and the image of the guys running on the beach. Most people probably couldn't tell you what this movie was about. I was one of those people 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
For me, though, this score, looking at it on its own,
Raiders?
no, looking at Chariots on its
Chariots,
own,
yeah.
the reason why I'm taking it away from Chariots is the opening theme, as I've talked about, is great. It works. It's iconic. It's an earworm. It does everything that it should do. The rest of the score, I just don't like that much. It's not that no, I'll take that back.
That's fair.
The rest of the score just isn't memorable. The music unto itself is totally fine. Whereas Raiders of the Lost Ark, you have, of course, the great theme, but the entire score is memorable. I mean, look, it's almost not fair. Somebody said John Williams is better at his job than anybody's ever been at any job ever. And it really is true. I mean, we're never going to have, my favorite film composer is probably John Barry, but John Williams is the best. I mean, John Williams is responsible for the most iconic film scores of all time. I really don't think there's a more effective film score in history than Jaws. And Jaws is my favorite of his. But if somebody said Star Wars, you'd be like, yeah. If somebody said Raiders, you'd be like, yeah. If somebody said Superman, you'd be like, yeah. Younger people might say Harry Potter. I mean, I don't have to tout John Williams. The man has 5 Oscars. He wins.
Who's this guy? What's his name?
He wins the very next year for E.T., and that's his 4th of 5. So John Williams didn't get fucked over this night. But I do have to be honest that just as a score, not knowing these other ones, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is far superior. But this doesn't make me mad, and it would not make me mad if I were an adult.
No one in the world can argue against the Raiders of the Lost Ark score.
Of course not.
It's
a really
one
rich
of the
choice.
Great,
It's a really rich choice between these two. So I'm going Raiders, but it's not an outrage that Chariots won, because when I was like, of course that won, and that makes perfect sense.
And by the way, well, you know this. It sounds like your spotlight is about this. Really deep year for scores and songs and music.
Yeah.
And you feel it at the Oscar ceremony. So, I mean, this was, this is Michael Jordan versus LeBron James, and everyone else is good too.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting? We're on it. You walked me to the bell. Let's ring it. I have talked a lot with composers, including Ronan Landa, who composed the theme to this podcast,
which is great, by the way.
I
love that theme.
Yes,
yeah,
I think it is great.
I'm going to run in slow motion on the beach to it later.
You have to run a little faster to that theme, but I think you get a better workout with Ronan's music, at least cardio speaking. But what's interesting is I've talked to a lot of composers about this, and a lot of people who are just really into film music about this. In the 80s, I think that take John Williams out of it, because John Williams is Michael Jordan or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He's his own person. Even if John Williams were not working this entire decade, every movie in the 80s had a theme that I could hum. And I don't just mean like the Spielberg movies. I don't just mean like the big movies. I mean things like Remo Williams and Blue Thunder and 48 Hours and Commando and Aliens and Gotcha. And I mean, some of these movies I'm naming aren't movies people have even heard of. Big movies had film scores that you could hum, that you knew, and little movies that were sort of like disreputable had theme music that you could hum and that you knew. And
it's a shame Hollywood went away from that.
Hollywood went away from that, and we have composers working today who are as good as they've ever been. But Ronan Landa, I'll quote him. He says that melody is a risk. That studios, I don't know why, but I talked to a lot of composers when we were doing our short Blinders. I interviewed a lot of composers, and a lot of it was just talking about this. And a lot of studios, for reasons passing understanding, discourage composers from using melodies like you could hum, like Star Wars, like Jaws, and There's a reason that we can't hum the Iron Man theme. We can't hum the Captain America theme. We can't hum the Spider-Man theme. And it's not, I'm not pissing
Yeah.
on the MCU. There's enough people to do that. And it's not that these composers can't do it. It's that they're discouraged from doing it. And there's still good film composition happening. But in the 80s, again, even if John Williams, takes a knee, it's so great here throughout the entire decade.
Yeah, it was.
And into the
Yeah.
90s too, but the 80s in particular. I mean, why can I hum the theme to Blue Thunder, but I can't hum the theme to Iron Man? It's not because the Iron Man composer wasn't good enough to do it, is that he was handcuffed.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just sort of, I know that's a rant.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that, and it's too bad. I mean, look, being afraid of risk is the opposite of creativity. So
Exactly. So Moskowitz, does this movie cross the finish line or does it need 2 more yards? It's time to test our hindsight with the
Oh, boy.
verdict. So against Atlantic City, On Golden Pond, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Reds, was Chariots of Fire the best movie nominated this year? So of these 5, just sticking with the nominees, does Chariots keep its Best Picture Oscar? What say you?
this is very difficult. I want to just point out again, or if we've even touched this yet, really, how great a year of movies I think this was. I think these are 5 great nominees. I really do.
And you've
I-
seen all 5.
I have seen all 5.
I've only seen 4, but I have seen 4. So
I've seen all 5. I think all 5 are different and are trying to do different things. And I think that they all do them excellently. And I have an order in my head because I knew this question was coming. But I really think that all 5 movies deserve a shout out. And maybe we can talk a little bit more after I
What-
give you my
yeah,
decision here.
Yeah,
but,
let's talk about it.
um,
Well, what's
Yeah.
okay? So what do you want to
do
do?
you want me to rank them? You want me to go 5 to 1 or?
Let's go 5 to 1. We've never done this before. We probably can't ever really do this again, even on my. So yeah, so give me number 5,
Okay.
and then number 1 will be obviously if you say Chariots of Fire number 5, we'll know what the answer is. But that's fine. Yeah, let's rank them. Let's rank them 5 to 1, and maybe I'll do the same. I haven't seen On Golden Pond, so I'm going to be a little bit of a spoiler.
Yeah.
But I could talk about these other 4 intelligently. So yeah, so you're going to tell me go 5 to 1. What's number 5 for you of these 5?
So my 5 to 1 here, my number 5 is On Golden Pond,
Okay.
which is a great movie. The performances are unbelievable.
You think Henry Fonda should have won?
Yes, absolutely.
What about
Uh,
Hepburn? Because we're not going to talk about her in this the run of our.
Well, I'll be honest. I haven't seen French Lieutenant's Woman,
Okay.
so that's the other one. People thought Meryl Streep was going to win that night. She was winning all the preliminary awards,
Uh-huh.
and Katharine Hepburn was a surprise.
Oh, interesting.
And it was a sign that On Golden Pond had the momentum, perhaps, to win Best Picture,
Right.
and then didn't.
Right.
So people were like, "What is going on?"
Okay, but on Golden Pond, so go on with that.
No
Sorry.
issues with either of those wins. I mean, unbelievable performances. You would think those two had been married for 50 years.
Right.
They met the day they started shooting.
They didn't
supposedly,
know
something
each
like that.
other?
Not my understanding is they didn't really know each other. I'm sure they had met in passing.
Okay, they must have met.
Somewhere, but but no, they did not know each other.
Interesting.
I highly recommend that movie. You will. It's a very deep, emotional movie, and I think worthy of everything it won. I really do. And if any of these movies had won Best Picture, I wouldn't have an issue with it.
Wow.
That's how strong I think the 5 movies are in their own ways.
That's a sentiment.
And there's not a lot of years I would feel that about.
Maybe 1976. I've never seen Bound for Glory, but 1976, which we'll get to, God knows when. That's like probably the only year that I could say, because Rocky wins, but it's also Taxi Driver, Network, and All the President's Men. Between those 4,
Yeah.
it's kind of like,
Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah.
mean, any
Yeah.
one of those 4, you can make a very strong case for. I would not have been upset. I wasn't alive then, but like, again, Bound for Glory is a movie that I just don't know. I know what it's about, but that's the only year off the top of my head, just thinking of nominees where I would be like, yeah, throw a dart.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
and that's probably a stronger year than this year. But
of
I
course,
would
I'm just
say-
saying off the
yeah.
top of my head that like 76 is one of those years, or maybe even 75 where you have
Oh, yeah.
Cuckoo's Nest, Jaws,
Jaws
Barry
and-
Lyndon,
yeah.
and Dog Day Afternoon. in Nashville.
Every movie's a classic.
Right. So that's like maybe the only other one just the year before.
Yeah.
But that's very hard. And I guess
Yeah.
fuck, I'll keep going. I guess 74 almost.
Yeah. I know. 70. That's what I was gonna say. Every year in the 70s.
Yeah, Chinatown, Godfather
77,
2. Yeah, we keep going.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
maybe it's not as rare as I think, and this is why the 70s are going to happen late in this podcast. Okay, so on Golden
So
Pond.
on Golden Pond, number 5.
Number 5.
4, Reds.
Okay.
Reds is a great movie, everybody. I really think we haven't given Reds enough due on this because it's not about Reds. And unfortunately, that when Warren Beatty didn't win Best Picture 40 years ago, he knew that the real loss was that he wouldn't have his movie talked about on this podcast episode with Ed and I. And
Warren's
that's what
downstairs,
happened.
actually.
What?
Warren's going to be on next week's episode.
Oh, nice. Great. It's such a great movie. The guts it took to make this movie, I think today it's hard to really understand how big of a movie star he was.
Mhm.
And he was at the height of his powers.
Mhm.
He could get any movie he wanted made at this point, and he proved it because
Yeah.
he went for this movie that was a passion project. He willed it into being. He was told over and over again, people pleaded with him, begged, don't make this movie. You can make it. I mean, wasn't it one studio head who said, listen, I know we said we would give you $25 million to make this movie. Tell you what, new deal. We will give you $24 million. Just you take it, put it in your bank account, and go make some other movie for $1 million. I mean, people were pleading with him not to do this movie. He willed it into being. It is a fantastic, epic, sweeping movie. I don't think it's perfect. I don't know how many movies are perfect.
No.
I think it's a little long.
Yeah.
I don't know if the real life interviews with people, I sometimes it worked for me, but mostly I bumped up against it.
Oh, interesting.
I thought the performances are tremendous in this movie. I think Beatty's performance is tremendous. He plays that character with a lot more subtlety and lightness and sort of taking the piss out of himself in a movie that really could have been stodgy and idealistic. Diane Keaton's incredible in the movie. Jack Nicholson, I think maybe should have won the Oscar. And Maureen Stapleton did win the Oscar. So you're looking at just an incredible movie all around. And I just want to make sure that movie gets its due.
Yeah.
But I think it falls just a little bit short of what it was trying to accomplish. And I think the 3 movies above it, to me, in my opinion, are all monsters. So my number 3 movie is Atlantic City, which I know I like a little bit more than you like it. But
I just saw it today. I mean, I saw, but yeah, you do. That's fair.
I mean, Atlantic City was the critics' darling that year. I loved Atlantic City. As soon as I saw it, I told my wife, "You have to see this movie. I think you're going to love it." It's hard to explain what it's about to me without ruining too many.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think you could just say it's Atlantic City in this time in the early 80s was really kind of in transition, and the movie shows that.
Yeah.
It's not Las Vegas. It's very, and this is about. It's
I mean,
about
I
two
guess you could
characters
say-
who are extremely working, if not lower class.
Yeah. It's a crime thriller. Burt Lancaster plays this sort of over the hill, low level,
Gangster,
kind
yeah.
of mob gangster kind of guy. Susan Sarandon plays a casino worker who's trying to be a card dealer and also works at a restaurant there.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's all I want to tell you about this because
Yeah.
every scene, it's kind of going in a different direction than you think it's going to go. And Louis Malle is a brilliant, legendary French director. I thought the movie was genius. And in another year, it would have won Best Picture. It just didn't have the narrative that year. It won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival.
Yeah, a year earlier. And
Yeah.
Atlantic City is the only one of these that wins nothing.
Correct. Yeah.
It's the only one that goes, oh,
It didn't.
however
Yeah.
many nominations.
Just a tough year,
No,
I
I'm
mean, a lot
just
of
trying
yeah.
to make it clear for the audience.
But correct. Yeah. So that's my number 3. But to me, that movie's a 10 out of 10. As are the last 2 movies on this list. So this is very tough. But my number 2 movie for 1981 is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Wow.
and my number one movie is Chariots of Fire. I like
Love
how
it.
I didn't explain Raiders of the Lost Ark because I know everyone has seen
There's
it.
no reason to explain Raiders of the Lost Ark is. I love it. I really love that you upheld the Academy's, at least in this, at least for the verdict. I love that you upheld the Academy's vote. I believe your wife did the same thing for Slumdog. Not that that matters, but she's not even the first, because Alan Foreman, he took No Country all the way through to the end, meaning like he thought it was the best movie of the year. We'll talk about the year in a minute.
And by the way, Raiders is one of my favorite movies. It's not a top 10 movie for me, but it's probably a top 20. And now I realize so is Chariots of Fire, because if I want to be intellectually consistent, I have to slot it in right above Raiders,
Oh my God.
somewhere in the teens for
So
me.
I assigned a movie to you that you had never seen, and now it's one of your, where did you just put it?
I'd put it in my top 20.
Top 20.
Yeah.
Jesus.
You're
welcome.
No, you listen. You changed my life, and now I'm going to be humming this theme. My poor wife. But I think for me, and look, I mean, these are two monster movies. I've used that word a lot.
No, use it
tonight, but it is true. Raiders of the Lost Ark is genius. I think Spielberg's a genius. I think
you don't have to. I mean, yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark doesn't need you or I to like be like, hey,
for
guys,
those of you who haven't seen this movie,
give this Spielberg guy a chance. He was really good.
I just think that Chariots of Fire does so much work and speaks to these human themes, that the character arcs take you to places of the human condition and human expression that are just a little bit more poignant for me than what in the end Raiders accomplishes. But this is really two 10 out of 10 movies for me that are both in my top 20 of all time.
That's
so
incredible. I'll go to my verdict. I mean, I had not seen On Golden Pond, so I had nothing to say about it. I will see it at some point, I'm sure. Yeah, I think I'll take this one by one since you did. I'll try to be a little fleet about it. Reds is a movie I've seen a few times. I do think it's definitely worth checking out. I think it's definitely a miraculous achievement. I do think it's a little long in places. I think I might agree with you that these witness interviews, because what Warren Beatty does is he shot all these interviews with people who were witness to these events, who are like, these people are much older.
Yeah.
They're like in their 60s or 70s. Maybe they're probably younger than they look, because it's the early 80s.
Yeah.
Probably like 30,
Which is really cool, by the way. Like, I'd watch a documentary with those people.
Yeah, it's this interesting thing where he's intercutting. He's using the interviews to sort of like interstitially take you from one part of the story to the next, which is a very cool idea. I mean, he started shooting these interviews, I think, years before I don't think he even wanted to play John Reed. I think he was trying, but because he's such a big star. Or no, he didn't want to direct it, but he was already producing his own movies, and it got to the point where he was the only one who could do it, and God knows what he would have done to the director. The poor son of a bitch who would have gotten that job. The guy would have probably thrown himself out a window. I think Reds is definitely worth checking out. I think the performances are great. I do think it's a little long, but yeah.
Well, Beatty's funny quote when asked what Reds was about, he said, "It's a very, very long movie about a communist who died." Which I love his humor about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing about Beatty, because he wins Best Director for Reds, and I think that the two movies,
which I think was deserved.
Yeah,
in a tough year.
In a tough year, I don't know that I would give it to him, but it was definitely. I don't think the direction in Reds is stronger than the directions in Chariots of Fire. So I think I could say that much. I don't think that Hugh Hudson was robbed. He does a good job with this movie. But it's interesting because Beatty wins the Oscar for Reds, and the next two movies that he directs after a gap are Dick Tracy and Bulworth, which I actually both like better, and I think are much bolder directorially, and I think are just more fun.
Yeah.
And I think
Bulworth is great.
Yeah, and I think they're both riskier movies, not riskier, but they're both risky movies in their own way. So yeah, I think Reds is definitely worth checking out. Atlantic City, I just saw. I think Atlantic City, I will talk around the plot also. It's not a thriller, but there is it is hard to talk about what happens without, Mike is right, without giving too much away. I think what works in Atlantic City are the two lead performances, both of which were Oscar nominated. I do think that for Burt Lancaster, who's an actor I've always liked, but I think it was kind of I don't know what to compare it to. It's like maybe if like George Clooney worked with the Safdie brothers or something. I don't know if that's quite, it's really like kind
Mm.
of like, or maybe someone even a little older than Clooney, but like it was really cool that like this like Hollywood legend basically did this. I mean, you want to talk about subversive? I mean,
Yeah,
Atlantic
yeah.
City's way more subversive than Chariots of
No,
Fire.
without, yeah,
I mean, it's
absolutely.
essentially a French movie, but
Yeah.
like, but obviously made in America. I think what I bump on though is I don't love a lot of the performances in Atlantic City, except for the two leads.
Mm.
I think a lot of the actors are just not very strong. There's a lot of bad ADR, which is like all over 70s movies, even like great ones. Someone said, I don't know why ADR is a problem.
I did notice that. It's so funny you said that. There was one moment where Susan Sarandon says something. I was like, whoa, that was
Yeah, they're
poorly
so bad at
dubbed.
ADR. This movie, I mean, it's not
Yeah.
quite the 70s, but like ADR before the 70s and after the 70s is great. In the 70s, they just couldn't get it right in great movies, like Marathon Man, and like the ADR is just so bad. But I think there's a lot of things that are just clunky about Atlantic City that maybe haven't dated well. I almost kind of want them to try again because I do think the relationship between Lancaster and Sarandon is interesting. It's definitely worth checking out. Atlantic City is definitely a movie everybody should see. I just wasn't as hot on it as you were, but I think at least looking at those two performances, I'm like, yeah, these are two really interesting performances. Um, I don't know that I think it's cool that this movie was nominated. I can say that. I think it's cool that there was
Yeah.
like with this mixture because it is the smallest movie in here. It is sort of like the most offbeat. It's kind of like something you would see get nominated 10 years later in the 90s. So
It is a very 90s movie.
it's a little ahead of its
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
and I definitely think it's definitely worth checking out, even though I'm not quite giving it the full throated recommend. But I think between the movie that Mike saw and the movie that I saw, there's a movie worth seeing.
Yeah, yeah.
We can sort of leave it there.
I really appreciated it, as a writer. Even though I think the direction is the strength of it,
Yeah, well,
more
Louis,
so than the screenplay.
yeah,
I just really appreciated how, whether it was, plot or just even a line of dialogue, it would constantly take you to an unexpected place that somehow also made sense.
yeah.
And yeah,
It's definitely fleet of foot. It wasn't a hard movie to watch. It definitely was not. Look, if Atlantic City had won Best Picture, which I don't think was ever in the ether, I definitely would be talking about how this has got to be one of the least likely Best Picture winners, if not the least likely
yeah,
Best Picture winner.
yeah.
The way the way I will talk about things like French Connection or Silence of the Lambs, or the way I sort of talked about The Departed when we did that episode.
Mhm.
Not undeserving, just least likely. Um, so yeah, and obviously, I Chariots of Fire. You've heard my opinions on it. So I would give this rated as The Lost Ark.
Mhm.
Um, I don't think I have to make a big case for a movie that was literally the biggest hit of the year.
No, no, no. I
I'll
mean,
say a few
yeah.
things about it that I think are pretty. I mean, I'll be brief about it because again, this is a movie everybody knows, but this is by design. This is an A movie that's dressed up like a B movie. And I think there's the one thing I do want to say is that I think there's so many movies that are love letters to an era, but never get past their own novelty. I think that's like all they are. And they can't get past. It's like, oh, I want to make a movie that's like set during, this time period and I want to like make it look like this look. And there's so many movies that do that exquisitely well, but they aren't good movies on top of that.
Right.
And I think Raiders of the Lost Ark could have been that. You could see Spielberg saying like, I want to make a movie that's like an old serial, but he gives no attention to like the story, and it would just be like, well, this looks cool, and some people would go along with it. What's fascinating about Raiders is that it's totally unpretentious and it's childlike. It's got like a childlike glee to it, but it's
Mhm.
also elegant and epic, and it's doing those things all at the same time. And I think what's amazing is that kind of sums up what's genius about Steven Spielberg is that he was able in his movies, when he's at his best, which is like mostly, he's really able to do so many things at once. And I think what kind of sums up this movie's appeal is David Lean loved this movie.
Mhm.
David Lean was a huge Raiders of the Lost Ark fan, and David Lean was going to direct Empire of the Sun with Spielberg producing. I think David Lean, pretty close to the end of his life, probably got too sick to do it, but Spielberg and Lean were going to work together.
Mhm.
Spielberg, right after this starts producing like Poltergeist and Gremlins and Back to the Future
Yeah.
and like Goonies and all these things and Inner Space. All like
Mhm.
he's almost as famous a producer as he is the director. things that he didn't direct. So one of the Steven Spielberg produced movies was going to be a fucking David Lean movie, which he ends up making himself, and it's a great, great movie. But yeah, I mean, Raiders is great. Doesn't need me to. This is for me number 2 on my Spielberg list. Number 1 being Jaws. So just to tell you the company that I keep Raiders in,
Yeah,
and I
it's
think Last
well, yeah.
Crusade is like almost as good as Raiders. So like, it's I give Raiders a slight edge over Last Crusade, and that's a recent revelation. But I mean, nobody needs to be sold on Raiders. But I just want to talk a little bit about why
Oh,
I'm picking this of these 5 nominees.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's kind of cool that we had the same order, except for at the top, which I had a hunch we might split there. But and also you didn't see On Golden Pond,
Well, is our order the
but
same? Because I don't know how I would
yeah.
rank. Well, I put Chariots. I put Reds above Chariots, though. I don't think our order is the same.
Oh, I thought you were going up. I thought you said On Golden Pond, Reds, Atlantic
No,
City,
I didn't really rank
Chariots.
them. I was just
Oh,
no. I would say
well,
if I was
never
going to
mind.
rank them, I
I
mean,
was
obviously,
misled, folks.
it's okay. I mean, obviously, on Golden Pond, sort of NA because I haven't seen it. If I were to rank
Oh, so you
these,
put Reds.
I
Oh,
would
yeah.
rank
How would you
these.
rank
I'd
them?
rank them. So I'd rank Raiders to be number 1.
Yeah.
I go Raiders, Reds.
Oh, okay.
I might put Atlantic City over Chariots. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. Atlantic City over Chariots. I mean, they're so different, but I think like so much about those 2 movies works. I mean, I think performance wise, Chariots of Fire, the cast is uniformly good, even though I'm not into the woman in it. But I'm more interested in the main relationship in Atlantic City than I am in any of the relationships in Chariots. This is the thing that's like innately very silly about the Oscars is that like we're comparing movies that shouldn't
Yeah.
be compared.
Right.
But that's
Exactly.
that's in depth. I mean, that's always going to be
Well,
the case.
and I think, well, I would, there's a bunch of years in the 70s I would prefer to it, and I would probably prefer 1982 to it. And, there's a variety of years I could probably mention. 81, I feel like, is a particularly strong year. Also, with a bunch of movies we haven't mentioned, by
So
the
let's
way.
do it right now.
Yeah.
What is your favorite movie of 1981, whether it was nominated or not? I mean, or
Right.
movies.
Well, I feel like I'm gonna have to just stick with Chariots of Fire and Raiders at the top,
Okay.
and probably Atlantic City. But the one movie that I want to mention, there's honestly a bunch of them, but maybe this will be one of my spotlights. Can I have a couple spotlights here?
Yeah. Well, when we get to Spotlight, you can.
Oh,
say
okay.
it.
Well, then I'll save it. But there's there's at least one other movie I definitely want to mention.
So you're saying, just so we're clear, Chariots, Raiders,
Yeah, I would
and
say
Atlantic.
Chariots. Yeah,
You're saying Chariots number 1?
yeah, I would say the same
Okay.
3 movies at the top for me: Chariots, Raiders, and Atlantic City.
So you're taking Chariots all the way to the end. You and again, your wife, and Alan Foreman. I love it. So I'm going to talk about 2 movies. I've got a tie for the 2 best movies of 1981. One of them is a master filmmaker's masterpiece. The other one is one of the greatest directorial debuts ever. And these are both released in the same month.
Yeah.
Shows
Well,
you-
I know the 2 movies you're going to talk about.
All right.
One of them was the one I was going to mention. but-
Okay, well, you can
yeah.
mention it in a minute.
Yeah.
So the first one is Blowout.
Yep, that's the
Um,
one.
Brian De Palma gets a lot of shit for borrowing from Hitchcock, but here he borrows from Antonioni and Francis Ford Coppola, who made Blow Up and The Conversation, and I think he betters them both because he creates something using the same sort of kernel of the idea, and it's something that's way more user friendly by also being way more profound. I think John Travolta has never been better than he's been in this kind of movie, and this is the
Yeah.
kind of performance that never gets Academy recognition because he's like the Hitchcock leading man. And this is a performance that's so hard to do, and even if it's enjoyed and appreciated, it's just as quickly dismissed. I think another example. I mean, any Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart performance
Yeah.
has this. I think another one that's Kevin Costner in No Way Out. It's another one
Yeah,
where
yeah.
it's these are not the kind of performances. I mean, thrillers in general, and people have heard me bitch about this, and I'm going to continue to with this platform I've created for myself. Thrillers are not usually recognized
Yeah.
unless it's something like Parasite, which is a thriller but is talking about income inequality. It has there's some veggies that go with it that make
Yeah.
it okay for the Academy to like it. but yeah, I mean, this is just a real high point for Travolta. I also think that Nancy Allen was never better than she was here. She was
Hmm.
married to De Palma at this
Hmm.
time, and I think she brings a real humanity to a role that really could have been one dimensional. Like
Yeah.
I'm on the I don't even know the actor's name in Chariots of Fire for that role just being really flat. I think the Nancy Allen role here could have been that, but she really brings such a humanity to it. Um, I think her collaboration, she was married to De Palma at this point. This was their last collaboration. I think that the fact that they never made another movie together is sort of like maybe the biggest casualty to this movie bombing because it did bomb. I think this is the best Brian De Palma movie. I think this is a master filmmaker's masterpiece.
Well, I'll say that this was, I had a couple spotlights in mind because one
Well,
of
do it now.
them,
You can do it now.
my better half, uh, also encouraged me to say Travolta's performance in Blowout as a spotlight. I mean,
Yeah, do it now.
Blowout is, I agree with everything you said. It's an incredible movie. Of all the movies not nominated for Best Picture, this is the one I wanted to mention.
0 Oscar nominations for this
Well, it was totally overlooked at the time,
because it didn't make any money.
it didn't make any money. And no, I think the two movies that really demonstrate how special 1981 is, Tarantino talked about how uh, 1981 was sort of the last year of the 1970s aesthetic, the new Hollywood aesthetic, and he um, holds up Blowout as the example of like the perfect 1970s new Hollywood aesthetic movie. And it really is a perfect movie for what it is doing, and Travolta's performance is incredible. And then so you've got that movie on one hand, and on the other hand, you've got Raiders, which to me launches the 1980s and is the most, like Pulp Fiction was the most influential movie on the 90s to me. I think Raiders may have been the most influential movie on what the 80s became.
And Tarantino, just to sort of close this loop, cast Travolta in Pulp Fiction because Blowout is like I think one of his 3 or 4 favorite movies.
Yeah.
So because people might not know, younger viewers, Travolta's career before Pulp Fiction was in a really dire place, and after Pulp Fiction, he becomes an A-list movie star. Even after, I mean, he is like a bankable
Yeah.
movie star for at least a few years.
Well, it's
you know?
almost like Blowout did catapult him, but it just took 13 years.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a great way to put it. So my other movie that came out just a couple of weeks later is Body Heat. So like Chinatown, this isn't just an homage to film noir. This is film noir. This is not just this is an incredible example of something being modern and a throwback at the same time. It's borrowing from things from the past. The basic setup of this movie is very similar to Double Indemnity, but this still feels really really original and fresh. And on the one hand, I really wish Lawrence Kasdan, by the way, is the guy who directed this and he wrote it, and he also wrote
Yeah.
As the Lost Ark.
Had a pretty good year.
Really good year.
Yeah.
The year before, he co-writes Empire Strikes Back.
Not
So,
bad.
so he was pretty much the most famous screenwriter in America for a few years, or at least the best one. On the one hand, I really wish Kasdan had tried his hand at this genre once more, but I'm wondering if this would be less special if he had. This whole cast is excellent, but this was Kathleen Turner's first movie, and this has got to crack some kind of top 10 or top 5 for like best debut performance because she is definitely on Mount Rushmore for femmes fatale. I'd put Barbara Stanwyck, Sharon Stone, and Linda Fiorentino on the mountain with her. I think William Hurt is really great here.
Yeah.
He was obviously on the rise and he would win an Academy Award a couple years later, but this is the movie of his I like the best because like he's definitely playing a guy who's like kind of a fool, but he has so much intelligence about him that it kind of elevates the movie. It's like, yeah, this guy's foolish, but I understand, he's still like sort of smart. He's like a smart, dumb guy. And I think that all comes down to the casting of William Hurt, who was played dumb in movies like Broadcast News. Like he definitely can do that. But, and I think this is like a real lesson for writers about how even the smallest roles can pop if you look at the writing and the performances. I mean, you have Ted Danson, J.A. Preston, and a really young Mickey Rourke in these supporting roles. And I always think about like, okay, would this be a role worth playing? Like if you're a young actor, like Mickey Rourke is in 2 scenes in this movie. I think it was only his second or third movie. And next year he does Diner and he's kind of off to the races. Ted Danson too had only been in a few movies, and a year after this he gets Cheers. Um, so I think it's a really good lesson about like every role's got to be well written, even
Yeah.
if they're sort of perfunctory. And yeah, I mean, I can go on and on, but I just think Body Heat is such an
Yeah,
example. And
it's
these
a
two movies
great
came out the same month, maybe like 2 weeks apart. So like if you'd gone to the movie theater in 1981, both of these were playing. So our next category is Spotlight, where we spotlight something from any movie, like a performance, cinematography, score, a stunt sequence, or whatever aspect from any movie that popped for us and we felt should have been nominated this year. Do you want to do another one? You did Travolta. Was that yours, or do you want to do something else? You can
So I came in greedy, I guess. I sort of had three spotlights. One
go
of
for
them
it.
was Travolta and Blowout. Um, my second one, which sounds like it's also yours, my second one was just music in general.
Okay.
Was just scores and music. Um, I mean, aside from Vangelis and John Williams for the top two scores, you've got. I mean, the Elmer Bernstein score to Stripes is unbelievable in
Yeah,
this year. I mean, it's
it
just
is.
it's a ridiculous year for music. In terms of songs, the Arthur theme wins, incredible song.
Great song.
Um, and the competition was thick, and so just shout out to music generally, and we should be so lucky to have years that strong
Yeah.
in music.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna spotlight 2 scores from 1981. One of them was a breakthrough, kind of like Chariots of Fire, and the other one was a throwback. So the first is Thief by Tangerine Dream. Tangerine Dream had already done Sorcerer for William Friedkin, which was not a hit, but did have this electronic sound that we hear here. Thief is sort of a consummation of an electronic sound that was signaled that the 70s were over and that the 80s had arrived. I think Thief is like a great example of what you were talking about earlier, how like, okay, now we're in the 80s.
Yeah,
This is
yeah, yeah.
different. Music, like things if you look at Thief, it definitely looks like a 70s movie. It's probably shot in like 1980. I mean, it's definitely like a lot of big Cadillacs and like, like leather jackets and like some sideburns are still sticking around. But if you listen to Thief, like, oh, this is the 80s. Like
Yeah.
it's already started.
Yeah.
And I think that like the way I talked about Blade Runner, the Vangelis score to that, I think that the score to this gives it like a very timeless quality. And I do think electronic scores became kind of rote in like the 2010s. Like every independent movie had like a Tangerine Dreamish score, and I felt like it got a little played. It's a trend that they kind of ran into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause there was just so many movies where it's like, oh, the score is electronic and it's like Tangerine Dream. And it's like, yeah, but if everyone does it, it's not cool.
Yeah.
But everyone was not doing it in Thief. And but when Thief came out, and I think that Tangerine Dream did a lot of scores I liked, some of which I'll maybe point to in the years to come that we're covering to come. But yeah, I think that it's a really cool score. And again,
yeah, that's a great one.
Really shows Michael Mann, who's always been really smart about music, really is signaling that like, oh, okay, 70s are over.
Yeah.
Like, we're in the present, we're in the future. The other score I want to mention is a throwback, and it's John Barry's score for Body Heat. I just went on and on about this movie a minute ago, but I left out its classiest element, and that's John Barry's score. I think this is a lush, elegant, and epic sound that kind of confirms the movie is a real deal. Because I think if you were to look at this movie, it's really well shot, but I think the reason why this movie can't be dismissed as like an erotic thriller, which I think it is, but it can't be dismissed as like one of those shitty ones from the 90s, like that came in the wake of Basic Instinct, is the screenplay. But if you don't stop to watch the movie, you're not going to hear the screenplay. But the score, if you listen to it, this movie has such a lush, elegant score that's telling you, no, this is a real movie. This is like, this movie is working. And it's kind of a comeback story for him because in the 60s, John Barry was the man. He was the composer. And then John Williams comes in the 70s and never leaves. And Barry was sort of relegated to doing really great scores for mostly kind of shitty movies, or at least like cheesy movies. And the year before he does this score, he does a movie called Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour, which was funny because David Sipkin's mom, Vivian, who we both knew, had the cassette of that, the John Barry score. It was the only film score she had that I knew of, and I didn't know what it was. And I knew another woman, our age, who loved the music. And I think these two women don't represent all women, but I think the score to that movie, because Somewhere in Time is a very lush, romantic movie, and the music in that movie is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And that Somewhere in Time and Body Heat kind of bring him back in the 80s. Like he's, John Williams is in his own class, but if you look at the scores that John Barry does in the 80s, he eventually wins another Oscar for Out of Africa. He wins his last Oscar for Dances with Wolves, which is another case where he takes a first-time director's movie and really elevates it. So we'll be talking about him there. But I think the score to Body Heat is a fucking class act, if you'll forgive the accidental pun.
But I do want to say that, it's sort of in closing, because we've talked about a few movies a lot here, obviously the ones nominated and Chariots of Fire and Raiders of the Lost Ark, but 1981 is a very, very deep year of movies. We haven't really even talked about.
Well, actually,
Thief. We haven't
I'm
talked about.
going to interrupt you because we're going to get to that right now.
Perfect. Here we go.
I'm going to.
I'm prescient.
The special programming announcement that I teased. It's time to do that. So normally at this point of the show, I would tell you what we were covering next week, and normally I would name another Best Picture winner, which in this case would be Gandhi. We're not doing Gandhi next week because, like you said, we've talked about a few of the 1981 movies that weren't a part of the Oscar conversation. We talked about Thief, we talked about Blowout, we talked about Body Heat. But we've only scratched the surface. I think that for all the talk about 1939 and 1999 and a few others, 1981 may be the single best movie year ever. So I'm going to read off the movies that were released that year that I like. This isn't all of them, and you can add to this. I know you would add Chariots to this. I know you would add Chariots and Atlantic City to this list, but here's my list. This is in order of how they were released, meaning like months. Modern Romance, Thief, Outland, Raiders of the Lost Ark, History of the World Part 1, Superman 2, For Your Eyes Only, Stripes, S.O.B., Arthur, Blowout, Prince of the City, An American Werewolf in London, Body Heat, Absence of Malice, Sharky's Machine, Taps, Reds. That's all in 1 year. You would obviously add, Chariots and Atlantic City to that.
Oh, well, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I mean, even other movies. Did you say Evil Dead?
I did not.
Did you say, I mean, it's such a deep year.
What did I forget?
Across genres. I mean, my Dinner with Andre.
Is that 81 or 82?
That's 81.
Oh, okay.
That's 81. You're just every genre. Drama, thriller, horror, comedy. It's a deep year.
Action. I mean, there's a great James Bond movie this year.
Mad Max.
Yeah. All that is to say, we're taking a sporadic break from our Best Picture coverage for a series I'm going to call 1981ers, where me and a guest will dive into these movies individually. Not all of them, but a lot. So these episodes are going to pop up throughout this 1980 season and possibly beyond into seasons to come. Again, you will get your Gandhi pod that I know you're waiting for, but you're going to have to wait a little while. Next episode, Travis Sentel and Kaylin Egan join me for a dive into a 1981er, Modern Romance. Till then, looking forward to looking back.